Thank you very much, Letitia. Good morning, everybody. As Letitia said, I'm Craig Willis. I'm Senior Vice President of Global Markets for Growth Energy. I wouldn't expect many of you to know who Growth Energy is, but we're very similar to UNICA. We're based in the United States. We're a trade association that is an advocate for ethanol, and also we spend a lot of time on market development of ethanol, and that's why I'm going to talk about E15 here. We are based, Growth Energy, in Washington, D.C. We represent the majority of the ethanol industry in the United States, and we have 100 ethanol plants as our members. So as many of you have heard or maybe read in the news, we've had a lot of news on E15 here recently. May 31st was a big day for us in the United States. That's when the EPA reported that they were going to lessen the restrictions on the sale of year-round E15. It was a huge day for the industry. In fact, President Trump was in Iowa just last Tuesday to celebrate the big win. This is a big deal for us in the United States. For those of you not familiar with the rule, from June 1st to September 15th every year, retailers who had E15 at the dispenser had to either relabel and call it a flex fuel or begin selling a new fuel, which was very confusing to the consumers. So it really prevented the build out of E15 in the States. And we've done a lot of celebrating over the last couple weeks here. We've spent as Growth Energy almost a decade trying to change this rule, and rural Americas spent a lot of time on this rule, our members, the farmers, so it was a good deal. So here's where we are today in the United States, and the reason we get these numbers, Growth Energy is a part, and we're very closely aligned with a group called Prime the Pump. And Prime the Pump was set up to help develop markets and put all these stations that are on the map in the United States to sell E15. So because of that, we have a unique position as Growth Energy to know what's going on at each one of these retailers, and we have very close relationships with them. So we have a good feel for sales of E15. So as of last week, we update these almost weekly. There's 1,817 retail sites in the United States selling E15 today. We have 4,300 sites selling E85. So with this effort, E85 has also climbed quite a bit. And the retailers that we have offering E15 are no ordinary retailers. If you look, if any of you have been to the United States before, you may recognize some of these retailers. They're some of the most respected and most progressive retailers in the United States, and they represent 12 of the top 20 retailers in the United States. Their sites, if you look at them collectively, they tend to sell 2 to 3 times the annual amount of gasoline as a normal gasoline station. So these are the type of retailers we want offering E15. And collectively as a group, they collectively have 9,300 sites in the United States that sell 19 billion gallons of gasoline. So these retailers do know what they're doing, and they're who we want to be aligned with. E15 today is called, and I'm going to talk about this in a couple slides, it's called unleaded 88, and it generally, in most cases, and generally it sells 3 to 5 cents per gallon less expensive than E10. So when I start talking, I guess one other point I'd make here too, these brands that are up on the screen have hundreds of millions of dollars invested in those brands, and they were willing to be some of the first to offer E15. And we think that says a lot to our product. I know this audience knows we have a good product. Ethanol is a great product. But the fact that they put those brands on the line, I think, is going to help us as we continue to have this rollout in the United States. And we just updated the numbers last week. There have been 10 billion miles that have been driven with E15 in the United States, and we've had no complaints. And I know all these retailers very well personally. They've had zero problems with it. So the first question we tend to get from our members when we show them that first slide is, where are we going from here? And this slide shows the amount of commitments that we have for E15 at retail outlets in the United States. And as you can see, if you look out to year 2022, we have commitments for 3,532 stations offering E15. And those are high volume stations, as I said before. Those stations sell collectively 7 billion gallons of gasoline, or almost 28 billion liters of gasoline on an annualized basis. So they have a big footprint. I think an important point to be made here is these commitments that we have are before this rule change that we had on May 31st. So these retailers were willing to commit to E15 before that rule change. And I can tell you, I've been in the ethanol business 11 years. The number one pushback we've had in the last 2 or 3 years from retailers as to why they aren't offering E15 is because of this year-round rule that was out there. As I said before, it caused retailers to have to change labels, to change the fuel out. It was confusing to the consumer. So having that behind us, I think will increase those commitments over and above where they are today. In the United States, we spent a lot of time, because of our relationship, Growth Energy's relationship with the retailers, we spent a lot of time trying to understand what would make E15 sell the best. And what we found after having focus groups, meeting with consumers at the pump, at the street level, talking to these retailers who are great at selling everything, what the consumer wanted at the end of the day was E15 to be sold as gasoline. The name E15 to them is a little bit confusing, and so what we ended up coming up with was what it says right here. Unleaded 88 is what E15 is called at most of the dispensers that offer E15 in the United States. And right now we have 92% of the stations in the U.S. that offer E15 are calling it unleaded 88 today. So as we transition, we've started off E15 initially with the initial retailers. Typically, they would offer E85 at their stations, so they would put in an underground gasoline tank that had E85 in it. They would add some blender pumps and blend the E85 with the E10 to get the E15 blend. Well, now we've transitioned, and the way that transition happened was we have a big retailer, and they were up on the map there 2 ago where I was showing you all the stations. There's a retail chain called Quick Trip in the United States with a K. There's 2 different Quick Trips. Quick Trip built several small terminals around their mix of over 500 retail stations, and they blended their own E15 at these small blending sites, and then they replaced their mid-grade, which was an 89 octane product, with E15 or unleaded 88, and they offered it at 3 to 5 cents less expensive than E10. Well, when they did that, the terminals began to realize if they didn't evolve and didn't start allowing E15 to be offered in the terminals, that they would start to lose market share from some of the largest retailers across the nation. So what we've seen happen since 2017 is we've gone from 5 terminals offering E15 at the rack to now we have as you can see on the map, we have over 150 terminals that have E15 at the rack. And that's key because it allows retailers that maybe are smaller, retailers that don't want to put in their own blender pumps, that don't want to put in their own blending stations they can just go pick up E15 at the rack or at the terminal and bring it to their stores and replace E10 with that. This slide just goes on to talk a little further into how that evolution has happened. As I said before, we had the E85 initially was the initial blend stock at a lot of the retailers starting off. But now we've moved on into this terminal side, and what we hope is going to happen with time, and remember I've mentioned several times, E15 generally sells 3 to 5 cents less expensive than E10. We think it's going to cause retailers that are not offering E15 today to start to lose market share, and we've already seen that in various markets. And we think now having it available at the terminals that we had on that previous slide, our ultimate goal, of course, is to transition from E10 to E15, and we think that the terminal network will help to cause that to happen. So the last slide on E15 here in the States, and then I'll go to Mexico. Where do we go now in the States? Well, remember, all the sales data that we have at these retail stations has been where we've had 3 months a year where the consumer and the retailer has been upended because of this rule that was in place. Now that retailers can sell their product year round, they're going to be able to see what the sales are, and what we believe is going to happen is they're going to see their incremental sales overall at the store be increased because they're selling a product that has more octane in it and generally sells cheaper than E10. So we're going to be doing a lot of studies on sales rates, on the importance of the discount of the E15, and also on signage. I mean, we find that having E15 or unleaded 88 on the price sign tends to cause consumers to come in because they notice that price is cheaper. So it tends to bring more consumers into the store, helping overall sales. So as we're talking about the Americas, I'll move on from E15 here in the States, but we'd be remiss not to talk about Mexico. There's huge opportunity in Mexico. I can tell you in the U.S. we're watching it very closely. And just for some background, back in June of 2017, E10 was approved throughout over 2/3 of the country in Mexico. And prior to that, ethanol had never really been used in a material way. There had been some pilot programs, but it had never been used in a material way. And why are we eyeing that? It's because Mexico's gasoline market is a little bit smaller today than California, so it's a huge potential demand area. And today, like I said, they do not use any ethanol on a material basis. So we see a potential there of 1.2 billion gallons if the entire country was E10, and like I said, that's zero today. So you're looking at over 4.5 billion liters of potential demand. Today, the country uses MTBE as its octane of choice primarily, not entirely, but primarily. Ethanol, as you can see on the slide, competes very well versus MTBE. If you go back and you look at the chart or the slide, ethanol is on the bottom, it's orange. The other two lines are BTX, which is another aromatic octane group. And then MTB is also, I guess it's in the middle there in the blue. But if you look over 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10-year horizons on ethanol relative to MTB prices, ethanol runs between 2 to 3 pesos per liter, or 40 to 60 cents per gallon less expensive than MTB. So we think in a country where gasoline is quite expensive, in fact, it's more expensive than California and Mexico, which is saying something because California does have expensive gasoline, that this is a great solution for the government to help to open this market up. So there's 3 cities in Mexico that were not approved for E10, and they're the biggies. They're Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey are the 3 that E10 was not approved. There were some concerns raised by our opponents, you can guess who they are, that said E10 would cause problems in the ozone in Mexico City because of the elevation and because it sits in a valley or in a bowl with the mountains surrounding it. So the government of Mexico ended up doing a study on a vehicle fleet of E10, and what they ended up finding was exactly what we thought they would. Ethanol is, in fact, as good or better than MTBE in Mexico. And so what our hope is that the CRE, who's the agency in charge of making this decision on the big 3 cities, on E10, they're reevaluating this now with this information, and then also with the price information. And we're hoping that soon E10 will be approved throughout Mexico, and hopefully we can begin to make market share and gain market share and help the consumers save money at the dispenser in that country. So with that, I'm going to close up here. Turn it over back to Letitia. Thank you.